Yeah, so I'm Audrey McElroy, came for BUN, and that's my brother Jack McElroy, came for ZIA. We are from Cumming, Georgia, just a little bit north of Atlanta. We've been involved in amateur radio for many, many years now, especially in how to do balloons. With the help of Bill Brown, we became involved in doing launches, and as you can see, that's us on the left. That's me helping out a launch with Georgia Tech students last year. And then on the right is our most recent launch back in March. That was used as my capstone project for my high school. We launched a biological sample of little roundworms and studied the effects of the high altitude atmosphere on them. So yeah, Jack is starting high school this fall, and I will be continuing college here at Georgia Tech in pursuit of a degree in computer engineering.
So you just heard me mention Yoda Camp. You're probably wondering what that is. You probably have heard of it, because there's been a lot of news about it. But what it basically was and really is well, first off, Youth on the Air is really more of a movement for basically pushing kids to ham radio and really keeping kids in the ham radio, especially the age range of about 15, 25 and younger and a little bit older. But there's just a pretty large deficit, and bringing kids into ham radio is pretty big goal, not only for Yoda but also for us. And so now with Youth on Air Camp, what we basically did throughout the camp was had a lot of presentations, had workshops where basically had kids do hands-on events that basically let them know that ham radio can be interpreted in so many different ways, whether it be contacting satellites or doing fox hunts, or even going down to Antarctica to do all sorts of experiments down there. And so for us, I got to present there. Sally, my sister, she couldn't make it down there, but me and my father, we went up to Westchester, Ohio at the Voice of America Museum, which is where the Yoda camp is held. It was held there last year, 2021, and held there this year, from about July, I believe it's like July 12th to July 17th, something like that. And we presented about high altitude ballooning, and we did two kinds of launches there. We did a high altitude latex high altitude balloon, as well as a Yokohama balloon launch.
Yeah, so the at Yoda, my brother and my father, I wasn't there, I was in class here, but they launched an HEB, which is somewhat similar to what we saw in that earlier picture. As you all know, our system kind of we've developed our payload initially a couple years ago when we first did our own individual latex launch was pretty clunky. Now we've gotten it down to a little more of a science. We use Big Red Bee trackers, and in this case, as you can see, the Eagle Flight Computer is an addition onto that. That was used primarily for my project in March, and that's really nice because if you want to gather data about the temperature and pressure and some more in-depth information on the location of the payload, that's great to use for that. Takes data every 6 seconds. It's really interesting. Their balloon launched and reached an altitude of about 100,000 feet. I remember tracking it, even though I was here. It was a really interesting launch, took an interesting path. I believe, Jack, didn't it go back and forth? They made it like a loop-de-loop or something. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, went down a little bit south, made a loop, when it popped, and it came down a really, really nice field where he picked it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, luckily enough, most of our launches have actually landed in places where we were able to easily get to them. The one back in March landed in a peanut farm here down in South Georgia, so that was pretty lucky. And Jack has some footage here to share.
So first footage is just a quick snippet of a drone, basically drone view of launch from bringing it from its preparation area to its launch. So that whole entire area, we basically, that's on side of the Voice of America Museum, where we basically just took all out the balloon, we filled it up there, and this is all the kids, pretty much all the kids in the blue shirts. That's most of them. They all helped out building the payload, putting the payload together, filling out the balloon, and even dragging and launching the balloon.
And it looks like, from what I gathered down while I was still in Georgia, the balloon at Yoda Camp tends to be the big hit, not only this year, but the past year, because I mean, it's, what's not interesting about balloons, and the kids love, as Jack can attest to, they always find something interesting to put in the payload. So it's always a lot of fun for them.
Oh yeah, this year we originally were going to put a little honeybee that they found into the payload, but sadly when we were adjusting the position of the bee, it escaped. So instead we put in a spider we found, died long legs. We just put in there, hope it would survive, which you've seen the later slides that it did not.
Although I have to add, my roundworms in my experiment did survive.
Yes,
And
Audrey.
we actually, yes, after doing some studies on them, we did find there was a little bit of a significant, there was a significant change in their reproductive rate, which was interesting. So yeah, that's them setting it up. You guys really had a nice field to launch in. Oh my goodness. Wow.
Oh, yeah. The VOA museum in the park is really beautiful. So that's pretty much nearing the launch. So we can hop out of this, go back to, and then, so this is the launch view from the ground of it launching, taken from my dad, W4SDR.
Okay, 5,
See, there we go.
2, 1.
So as you can see, we obviously didn't fill it up with enough helium, but it's just hot outside, it's muggy. We were doing the best we could, because if we didn't, we just melted with how hot it was out there.
We have a launch.
And then here is the footage from the camera on board the HEV rising.
Yes, this is footage from my launch back in South Georgia. You can tell South Georgia by the number of the fields and everything. This was a very interesting launch, and we had footage on the way up. Unfortunately, on the way down, the battery died. But as you can see, that's it on the ascent going up. It's very interesting. I like to think, I wonder what my little worms in their little petri dishes were thinking at this point. But it was like very different conditions than on surface level, as you all know.
I mean, yeah, actually, you can definitely elaborate on that. Because how big that was, especially for you while we're watching the video.
Yeah, so this is just a little bit. I think that's good.
And then, so that if you heard the beeping, that's just the beeper that we had on board the balloon.
Yes.
We use that for assisting for when we're tracking, recovering the balloon. Because, yes, it did land in the field. Yes, we did have GPS, APRS tracker on it. But, if it's up in a tree and, you don't immediately look up, then, you won't find it until a very long time.
Well, what was interesting was that in this launch, APRS, it stopped transmitting. We stopped getting data on APRS at about 10,000 feet off the ground. So when it came to finding it, we ended up relying on what's called a spot trace, a little GPS tracker that helped us locate it. And the audio beacon helped us find where it was, which it happened to be behind a fence. I know earlier, before the presentation, there was a discussion going on about recovering balloons and where they were. In this case, it was behind a 6-foot barbed wire fence, just past it, probably 6 inches past it, but I was able to reach up underneath the fence and grab it. So that was definitely interesting.
And then our last link, this is our balloon on our latex HUB that we launched at Yoda. Sally, the camera just failed on us while I was going up on this ascent, so we couldn't catch the pop and it going up into near space. But we do have a time lapse that my sister put together from older launches back in July 4th of really like 2019, I want to say.
This was the 4th of July launch. This is a little bit of a time lapse we put together. This launch was also, all of our HAB latex launches seem to be interesting, but this one was cool because on the descent of this one, it stopped transmitting. We stopped getting down APRS as well at about 10,000 feet. And so there was no way of knowing at that point. We didn't have the GPS tracker or anything. And so we weren't really sure where it went. Luckily enough, it just missed a lake over in Ackworth, Georgia called Lake Allatoona. And we got a phone call, and it was, some guy who had found it out in front of his neighbor's yard. And so we were luckily able to recover it. But we definitely learned a lot from this one, I would say.
Yeah. So here's just pictures. As you can see, really just keeping.
Wow!
You're an
Adam Savage.
So yeah, there's some great pictures of them. You're good. You can leave it. There you go.
There we go.
Yeah, so there's some great pictures of Jack and the crew getting everything together. Jack, why don't you tell them a little bit about the process of adding and healing them and trying to get the correct amount of relift?
Yes. So in the top left picture, you see them balancing. You can sort of see a 2-liter pop bottle, the top of one. What that we basically did was we use that to kind of represent the payload, since you don't want to tie all the payload to the balloon while you're balancing it, because goodness knows what can happen. You accidentally let go of the balloon. So we use 2-liter pop bottles to basically represent the payload, and we basically fill them up until they get to the top, and we slowly decrease the amount of water them to represent the mass of the payload, and as well as the free lift. And we add them to the balloon. So once the balloon reaches neutral buoyancy, then we know that the 2-liter pop bottles have the correct mass in them to represent the payload and the free lift. And so then we know we can launch it, and we usually shoot for about 5 meters per second ascent time, mainly just VSATs. Quick enough not to be caught in anything like trees or power lines, but also not, so quick that will pop prematurely as it goes up in the air. So as talked about before, we also did a second launch of one of the new Yokohama balloons, and we use a 20-meter whisper tracker on it, just because these balloons, they can go for hundreds of miles, thousands of miles for months, and there may be some points where you can't get an eye gate for APRS, so the whisper helps us get to those receive stations. And the call sign is K4PRM, and K4PRM-1. As you can see in the top left corner, its last transmission was long ago down in some middle of nowhere in southeastern Ohio. That's mainly because we, same thing with this balloon, we didn't fill it up with enough helium, and so didn't gain a lot of altitude. Wind, it was very windy that day, and it just shoved the balloon down to a tree, and it stayed that way for a couple of days until it went dead. But it's definitely fun launch. Teaching the kids how to fill out the balloon, how to handle Yokohama balloons, and it's definitely a learning experience for us because we didn't have much experience with these balloons besides helping Tom Medland launch his WBI-11-12 balloons at the DA convention. So Different learning experience for us, but doing at Yoda really just showed us how good these balloons are, because
Mhm.
they're very good price, they're very durable. We didn't have to worry about popping or tearing or anything like that, or developing an air pocket like of previous super pressure balloons we've used before. But here's a
Yeah.
video of it being launched.
Oh, I think. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
The same thing happened on this one, same lack of helium. And this is in the back of the VOA park, next to the switch station that they used for the old transmitters and antennas back then.
Yeah. And so just adding on to the whole trial and error aspect of this, when we first started out using just mylar balloons, really, most of our balloons, as Bill Brown knows, most of them went, I heard someone talking earlier about the Bermuda Triangle. We had our own version of that off the coast of Georgia and South Carolina. It seemed like most of our balloons would go off and just disappear. It was trial and error. And so I think that in this case at Yoda Camp, it was, yeah, there wasn't enough helium put in the balloon, but it was a great learning experience for the kids, it looks like. And they were very invested, as Jack, I'm sure, can attest to. They were very invested in that balloon. And it's just trial and error, because eventually, with me and Jack, we eventually got a balloon that ended up circling the world basically 5 times. And so it's just working at it and just fine tuning the whole process.
Yeah, definitely. There's no better way to learn all this stuff than from experience. Because, I mean, if
Yeah.
you know I believe that it's more important for these kids to know the whole entire process of putting the balloon together. Having to stretch out the Yokohama balloons, pre-stretch them, then to attach the payload, to unreel the 20-meter dipole and make sure it doesn't get caught in anything, because as everyone knows, those things can be very fragile for the whisper transmitters. And then also launching the right conditions, knowing where to launch, knowing when to launch, that can really be a big decider. If you launch at night, it may go way farther than launching in the middle of the day. And that's what happened with us, with as Audrey said before, the balloon that went around the world. About 5 times we launched that at night, and it did great for months.
Yeah, and so here you can see them working on that process in those pictures there. And as you can see, they got the scale out, and I'm sure it was a great learning process for them.
So, as said, there was a Yoda camp in 2021. We also got to present about how to balloons, mylar balloons, all kinds of super pressure balloons, and then also latex HAB balloons. But main thing was we launched several balloons at that camp as well. So last year we launched the same thing, one big latex HAB. When we also launched about 4 mylar balloons, 4 small. I believe they're all APRS um, mylar balloons, and so the farthest one did go into Canada, which is pretty amazing. It's probably the farthest one that we have ever launched before of our mylar balloons. And then the latex HAB landed in a farmer's field, and the owners of said field were both they were both very experienced in ballooning, especially ham radio ballooning, because they worked for it was kind of like this Google Loon project where they got to launch balloons for Google, and so they knew all about it. And it is just one of those things that it only happens if you're in ham radio. You know.
Right. And that was definitely, yeah, that was really lucky that they ended up, landing, and they worked. Yeah, they worked for Google, and that was pretty cool. The odds
Yeah.
of that are insane.
Pretty much every latex launch that we have, we always have some very interesting recovery. But sadly, this launch wasn't that. This landed in a field, which is still very nice. Better landing in the middle of a forest. Um, so on the left, you can see that's a better picture of what they're doing, basically balancing, basically adjusting, fine tuning the weights of the tubular pop balls, basically fit onto the tied to the balloon to make sure it has the right amount of free lift. And on the right, you can see that's me pre-structuring the Yokohama balloons before we launched them. Um, and we found that it was better to, instead of putting a bunch of blankets on it and compressing the balloon overnight, it's better to that's an old um, vacuum pump that my father got from a medical auction, and it works great for all this stuff because we can put all the air in for air compressor, take it all out, and very um, expedient process.
Yeah. Compared to, I remember in the beginning filling up the Mylar balloons, if I put too much helium in them, I just suck it back out, and my voice sounded like, a little cartoon character for a little while. But that was the method I used, and it worked. So I like to say, we had to walk before we could run.
Yep, exactly. So on the left, you're probably wondering, why is there a circuit board in a Walmart pill bottle? Well, that's mainly because that transmitter is called a Big Red B. It's a 70 centimeter Morse code beacon, and it basically wrote along with the latex HUB just as backup, just so people can hear it, make sure the balloon's still alive. And on the right, that little Tupperware box. That's what most of our payload was in those exact Tupperware boxes. That's what's called Eagle, an Eagle Sky or Eagle flight computer, and those basically just track weather data such as humidity, temperature, speed, and all that. And so you just record it, put onto an SD card for you to review later. A lot better than what we did before, which is program Arduino, and it was definitely new for us, but the Eagle Flight computer definitely made it a lot easier and a lot of fun for the kids also to handle, because you don't want to go to some event and have everything half prepared. You want to have it already already for the kids, just to put together. They can see how it works, but they don't have to fill around with anything, or to they accidentally mess up or had to repair something themselves. So it's pretty much the same thing on the right. We use helium for both of these blends just because hydrogen. A lot of people, when you say hydrogen, they immediately think of Hindenburg burning up, people dead, all of that. But we're very lucky enough to get helium up there, and on the left, you can see that's just getting the whole entire payload for the latex blend altogether, because that's a very, very complicated process, as everyone knows if you ever launched a latex balloon. And so for our payload, we use what's called a modular payload system. We basically, instead of putting everything in a big box, we tied it all to one big string, which not only made it easier for recovering it, but also for launching it, as you don't have to pack it all in a box and hopefully or hope everything's turned on. Instead, you can individually check everything, individually make sure everything's tied, secured, and just make sure it's all ready to go right before you launch. So same thing on the right, that little Tupperware box, that's where we kept the spider for the biological sample. See a little Yoda sticker on it. And then on the left, that is our 1200 gram latex balloon. We used to use 1200 grams mainly just because that can lift pretty much anything that we could put up to it. Because even though, yes, we did have a very light payload, we wanted to have the ability to make sure that it's all going to go up just fine. There's more pictures of the balloon being filled up. And just going over the parachute, that parachute that we have right there, we've actually used that for several launches. We used it, of course, we used it for this launch for Yoda. We used it for a launch in March that my sister talked
Yeah.
about. We used it for our launch back in for the last Yoda, and then the July 4th launch talked about.
Yeah. Maybe it's our lucky parachute.
Oh yeah.
We've recovered every single one. Now what's interesting about our launches at the beginning compared to now, and Jack can talk about this, is the difference in what our payload kind of looked like. Because right at first it was the big foam box, but as over time we've developed a more module payload. Right, Jack?
Oh yeah. Because when we had the box, yes, you're not having it being kind of intrusive. You have a modular payload, and with the box, you can slap reward on it. People will notice it, but when you put everything in there, it's done. You can't open it up because then you have to do it all again. And so as I just said, that's something that you only learn from doing.
Yeah, it really is. It's not. I wrote a little white paper a couple years ago called HABs, or Altitude Balloons. There's not a manual to it, and that's just because in all the time we've spent working with these balloons, writing out a plan and following it, or going online and seeing other people have done, works some of the times, not all the way. And so most of it has really come down to us figuring out what best works. And so, like I said earlier, that's the whole reason the balloon that circled the world 5 times, the Midnight Rider, that balloon was launched in the middle of the night, compared to all the other ones we'd launched months and months before that all went down in the ocean at the same place, were launched during the day. And so it's something that we had to learn. And that's a great lesson for for the Yoda kids. And yeah, so it really is a great way to bring, kids into amateur radio.
Definitely. And we got this parachute. My father, he really liked it because it looks like the Apollo 13 parachute. Just so this, little interesting tidbit. We always have something special, something personal about all of our launches. And so this is the field that we covered it at. We had to walk about, there's like 0.4 miles, or 4 times per mile just to get the balloon. It is not a bad walk, but that's, I see the right picture. That's me and my friend Peter. He was also at Yoda, Peter Fujisawa, K8MPK. That's all the balloon altogether. That big styrofoam orb you're seeing, that is a voice beacon that we used that basically transmitted voice of me when I was 9 saying came for ZIA beacon. So you can only imagine what that sounds like. And then you can see on it all the signatures of all the kids, and that's the whole entire payload. And we recovered it all fine, and we even recovered most of the balloon. There's probably like a few pieces that were gone, but it was pretty amazing. Probably our best recovery yet. Not the most exciting, but definitely the most successful. So here's more pictures of us filling the Yokohama balloons inside. And if you ever fill one, you know how it can be kind of difficult getting open the filling hole on them. You gotta be pretty careful on them, or else you may break something, you may tear something. But once you get all set, you fill it up, you're good and set. And that, the right picture, you can see a yellow string that they're all dragging. That is the 20-meter dipole. So we probably had an extra 6 people on the back of it, making sure that didn't touch the ground, making sure it didn't get tangled. Because if that happens, I said before, it's all hosed. You're sunk. You can't do anything. So thanks for listening to me and Audrey present about Yoda. And any questions, we'd love to answer them.
Or any questions about the nematodes, or if anyone wants to know more about that.
Definitely. Very interesting launch.
How many students were at the Yoda camp, and how long the camp was it? How many days?
So the camp lasted, I believe it was the week of July, about July 11th, July 12th, lasting all the way to that Friday. We sadly had to leave on Thursday because my sister was moving into Georgia Tech that Friday. But it runs from Sunday to Friday. They're about, I believe there are 29 kids, I believe it was, all from varying age groups, all the way from about my age, all the way going up, into their early 20s. So you have a lot of different perspectives about ham radio, a lot of different, you know, lots of different knowledge that you can learn
And now we know, Audrey, you just started college at Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations. And what year in school are you, Jack?
I'm going into high school, 9th grade.
Yes. Well, Jack and I are starting big milestones at the same time. It's very, very cool.
Well, especially for you, though.
Rambling wreck from Georgia Tech. Yeah.
You may not know this, but I'm curious about how funding works with Youth on the Air. I've been approached by a group in Pennsylvania a couple of times to do balloon launches, and sort of two problems. One is they don't have a whole lot of money, and two, the particular Youth on the Air camp that they do, the trajectory that they would take, any HAB launch that they did would end up in a huge state forest. There's just no way it's not going to land in the middle of the forest. So any launch that they did would be a fire and forget. And so, I explained that to them, and it comes down to, how do you fund paying for either a balloon launch that they're very excited. They really loved the idea of doing a high altitude balloon, and I sort of had to talk them out of it. And we did a Pico balloon once with them. But even that, it seemed sort of hard to come up with funding. They ended up having like a couple of council members just donate cash. Do you have any idea how your launches are funded through YOTA?
What I know, and I think the extent, what I know of at least, is our money comes from YOTA. Is a, there's 3 regions of YOTA. I'm not sure exactly where the money comes from, but we got reimbursed is the way it worked. So everything we bought was just, that's a really good question. I'm not sure exactly where YOTA gets their funding. I'm sure most of it comes from donations and, some sort of, I know they work with like DX Engineering and big companies like that. So I think that's where most of it comes from. But we're fortunate, enough to be able to, get involved with these groups. And yeah, like you said, they were lucky enough to land in a place where there wasn't a forest, because I was here in Georgia watching it move, and I'm like, oh my gosh, please do not land in the forest, because I know it was going to be impossible to recover if it was. And so we're just
this particular camp that we were launching from is at like the western edge of the forest, and everything east is forest for 100 miles. There's just like no way they weren't going to land in dense forest. So it was tough, and it's tough for balloon launches since YOTA is on a particular weekend. Mm-hmm. For a Pico launch, you sort of depend on light winds and good weather. And again, it was sort of tough. I said, well, we might do a Pico launch, but if it's a windy day, we can't do it. Yeah. And, so, basically it turned out to, I couldn't help them, and I felt bad about it. But there's just sort of nothing I could do with that particular location.
Jack, at the YOTA camp, what were the surface winds? It looked a little breezy, particularly for a Pico launch.
Yes. Our surface winds, I do not remember. We should have checked windy. We mainly just relied on what direction it was blowing, because we were probably out there for like 5 minutes, just walking out there hoping to get a good wind direction, so it didn't go into the trees that are to our left or go into the power lines to our right. And so eventually found a sweet spot and we let it go. But last year we ran into a big problem, because right when we were launching all our Mylar balloons, a big thunderstorm appeared, and so we launched pretty much all of our milers except for one. And right when we launched it, it just started raining, and so it came right back down. We had to grab it and went back inside.
Yeah, they were. It's one of those, like you were saying, Michael. It's one of those difficult things with scheduled launches. I know. I remember seeing footage from the Yoda camp this past few weeks ago, and Jack can elaborate. There was a storm that came through. I think it was either just before or just after they launched the balloons. And Jack, how fast were those winds? It was a bad storm.
Yes, we did have a very bad storm this year. And we had a moonbound station at the Voice of America Museum, and it got, luckily nothing was destroyed, but almost got taken out, almost got swept away. And we actually, if you saw on the question side, we did have a flag for youth on the air camp on the flagpoles, and so was a U.S. flag, and both of those just flew right off the flagpole. And luckily, we did find them somehow, but thankfully we did launch them on right before the storm started to set in. But yeah, as I already said, this is definitely a problem with scheduled launches. With everything else you can do with schedule buff balloons, it's all matters of what Mother Nature says, whether if there's too much sun, too much wind, whatever can drastically affect your launch.
Mm-hmm.
We every year we launch something at the Dayton Hamvention, and every year we have thunderstorms and high winds. So a couple of years ago, the last Dayton Hamvention that was live, about, what was that, 2 or 3 years ago, we had high winds and thunderstorms. We launched in between thunderstorms, and we hit their hex beam, which looks like a spider web. And it was up there for about 20 minutes, and they rotated the antenna, and it finally fell off the hex beam. Then it hit a power line, and then it finally got free of that and hit a thunderstorm, and came within 200 feet of the ground and got out of the thunderstorm, and ended up 10 days later just off the coast of Turkey. So sometimes you get lucky during a scheduled event with bad weather. This year at the Dayton Hamvention, we launched 3 Pico balloons, and one of them survived because it was just in front of the tremendous line of thunderstorms, and it made it to Japan. So that's the farthest one launched from the Hamvention so far, and that was using a Yokohama balloon.
Wow.
Yeah, we definitely found a lot more success with our Yokohama balloons. We were switching over some, and also, it's really a very big step in hammer deal balloon, just because of how more available they are to people, especially to youth groups, school groups who don't really have that budget to spend, over $100 on just a balloon. Having these Yokohama balloons is really very much of a gift to this hobby.
Wow.
Well, cool. Thanks you two for presenting. It looks like Pedro has something he wants to show us, but thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Well, what you are looking on the screen is a facility that is available to everybody. I will put after the URL to reach. But this facility, we have been using for about 20 flights we made in Argentina. And always we were able to find and locate where the balloon payload land through this application. It is running online, and it shows all the points that the balloon is going, height, when the balloon will explode, when the payload will be released. It's has been very useful for us It also shows that you see these red lines here. It also shows the pointing to boards that is useful for local flying authorities to know where the balloon is and to take care if there are any flights going into the area. So this has proved very, very useful, and it's available for everybody to use during a land. It's online and real time. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That looks like a very nice program. I think there's a program. It's sort of similar to that, called HAPO. They use like a high split program. I think is what it's called. It tracks, as well as HAPHub using tracking the balloon. High split also predicts it as well as also telling you where it pops and all of that.